handful of prominent Republicans are trashing a bill that would impose punishments on international organizations for boycotting Israel.
Republican Congressman Mike Lawler and Democratic Congressman Josh Gottheimer had introduced legislation back in January.
Now, at the time, Lawler and Gottheimer said in a press release that the purpose of the act was to target harmful and inherently anti-Semitic boycott efforts by international government organizations. Critics, however, are sounding the alarm. Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene wrote on X, "I will be voting no. It is my job to defend Americans' rights to buy or boycott whomever they choose without the government harshly fining them or imprisoning them. But what I don't understand is why we're voting on a bill on behalf of other countries and not the president's executive orders that are for our country." Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna and Congressman Thomas Massie agreed with Greene's sentiment. Luna said that she vehemently condemns anti-Semitism but could not violate the First Amendment.
Apparently, the bill was supposed to come up for a vote today, but Greene said, however, that vote has been pulled. In January, Lawler said in part, quote, "This bill closes a critical loophole by ensuring that international organizations cannot enable harmful BDS, which is boycott, divestment, and sanctions efforts. This legislation is essential to safeguarding Israel's security and economy from unjust attacks."
So I was glad to see this bill, which is not a good idea in my view. I'm against it. I agree with Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massie. I was glad to see them speak out against it and work to defeat it. So the vote has been rescheduled and is, I think, just not taking place anymore. You know, this was a good example of bipartisanship can be good and bipartisanship can be bad from my perspective. I don't think, like Thomas Massie and Marjorie Taylor Greene, that it is the government's job to tell companies or organizations or individuals who all enjoy First Amendment rights what they can and cannot boycott. I will not be boycotting Israel. I don't agree with efforts to do that, but that is your right. I don't agree with boycotts in general, but you know, you can boycott for liberal reasons or for conservative reasons. Do whatever you want. You have the right, the First Amendment right. Actually, it touches on multiple amendments in our Bill of Rights, to engage or not engage in commerce with people you agree with or disagree with. That's your choice. None of the government's business, and so I am glad to see this was not voted on.
Yeah, this is probably one of the only and first times I'm going to say this. I agree with Marjorie Taylor Greene. Because I think, you know, hate speech is not protected, right? So obviously I condemn all hate speech, but political dissent is. And like you said, you have a choice on what to do with your thoughts. You have a choice on what to do with your money. But I think you don't protect Israel's democracy by stomping on ours at home. And that's a big deal to me. For the First Amendment is a huge deal to me. But I also want to point out that I think this is a little bit of political theater from Josh Gottheimer and from Mike Lawler.
Yes.
They both are running for governor. Well, Gottheimer said he is. Mike Lawler is putting his name maybe in the hat. But they both are running for governor. So they know taking a firm stance on Israel is something that maybe their constituents is looking for them to do. Like you said, they put this forward in January. That's probably ideas and rumblings of these running for governor ideas are already underway. And so, you know, as you're inching closer, you're getting a feel for it. There's also tons of town halls where people are yelling about the economy and other things. And this is a good place to say, oh, I put my foot forward on this. I was one of the first people to try to make some change in how people in Israel are being treated, and I did something about it. Because, you know, once you have it on paper and how you voted on it, and when you presented the idea, it gives you a leg to stand on when you're arguing a point. And so I think it's all politically motivated.
Yeah, as MTG said, you know, Congress takes very few votes. They're not doing very much. They're just leaving it to President Trump to do everything, and that's going to be a problem, I've argued, because when Democrats reassume control of some branch of government, Republicans will not hold government forever. So Democrats will be back in charge somewhere, maybe never the Senate again, but the House or the presidency. They're going to undo a lot of what Trump has done via executive orders unless it is enshrined in the law. So to see the opportunity to legislate, to legislate the popular parts of Trump's agenda, things having to do with DOGE or shrinking government, things having to do with immigration, other aspects, have that on the back burner and instead focus on criminalizing speech that is critical of Israel. And again, I don't agree with the speech. I think it is absolutely appropriate to condemn anti-Semitism, to stand with an ally, but that doesn't mean their issues take priority over our issues, our country's issues. And So I was glad to see, and like you said, I think it's an easy grandstanding point to make.
Right.
Maybe keep some donors happy, something like that, and but was not good on First Amendment issues. I should say that Matthew Petty, who's a colleague of mine at Reason Magazine, wrote about this and says, unfortunately, there are already a lot of anti-boycott laws on the books in many states. So this was going to make that worse, and he thinks also they could just slip this into some future appropriations bill, the bill that the whole Congress votes on without reading, that just continues all of the reckless spending they've been complaining about for years. That could include this provision in it.
The problem, $1 million in fines, 20 years in prison, I mean, this all sounds very authoritarian, and that's not the type of government that we live in. And I think that, like you said, while it's important to condemn anti-Semitism, it's also important to make sure that we are living by the standards that we set up in our Constitution, like free speech, and that's, really important. And like, as much as
I would condemn it if it was boycott of any cause or any country. It could be. It doesn't matter if I agree with it or not. It's
right. And free speech has protected, even whether you like it or not. It's not always your side, your team, or what you're standing for. Free speech has protected so many great things, from civil rights to on and on. So you have to make sure that when you're protecting free speech, that you're protecting all people's right to choose and speak freely.
Right. And also, if they made this law, eventually it would go before the Supreme Court, and eventually the Supreme Court would say, yeah, this violates the First Amendment. They would say it very clearly, 9-0, there will be no ambiguity. The court has ruled on speech-related issues so many times, has carved out extremely narrow exceptions to the First Amendment for imminent threats of violence, for libel, for copyright infringement, other very narrow things, not just for expressions of political opposition or opposition to political causes or countries. That's so obviously included in what you're allowed to say and write and do that it's very funny.
And while I do agree with Marjorie Taylor Greene that there's a lot to vote on, I don't know that it's all of Trump's executive orders.
Well, I don't know.
Some of them are quite silly to me.
The things she wants to vote on, but
I think there are pressing issues. We can all agree that are pressing for all Americans, not a Democrat or Republican, like the tons of things that we can think about discussing immediately and putting action behind.
But here's a question for you. Liberal media frequently portrays Marjorie Taylor Greene and Anna Paulina Luna and these people as like insane or crazy or the most far-right, fringy, conspiracy theorist individuals. And here they are voting to defend First Amendment rights, whereas more mainstream people in the Republican and Democratic side were going to blithely criminalize speech. I think that's an indictment of mainstream or establishment kind of politics on both sides, that you say these are the crazy people, but they're the ones voting to defend my rights, not you.
Well, look, that's why we're here at Rising, to give it to them straight, right?
Yeah, I like that.
That's why.
Yes, indeed.
So listen, she's a former Reaganite. She's a former Reaganite turned Gen Z Dem, and she's fighting her way to the Capitol on TikTok. She's going to join us next.